Hello, everyone. You got Nicholas Morgan here, and I'm going to give you some league rules and an explanation of this Ultimate Fantasy. And I just want to preface with that by saying this is a lot. It's rather complex, but I don't think anyone has ever done this before. I certainly haven't. So just remember, it's a trial year. Don't be afraid because you don't really know exactly 100% how this is going to work. I'm very open to ideas. We will try our best to improve this league as we go. So just try to give it a shot. If you have questions, text me, email me, call me, whatever. I'd love to try to clarify it with you. And I think this could be a lot of fun and something that hopefully we can do for several years in the future. So to begin with, we'll start out with dues. Each member of the league is going to pay $50 for the first year. After that, you'll see through explanations that it's basically up to you how much money you want to invest into your team. So it's very important that you commit to this for several years for each team member in order for this to continue, or I guess you could possibly sell your franchise to another team member that be interested in joining the league in the future, because we are only going to have a certain amount of slots. It's going to be an auction draft. It's not going to be your regular snake draft or however you want to do it. It's going to be an auction, and how it'll work is each team will have $200 during the auction draft to create a financial even playing field for the first year of the dynasty. It's up to you how you want to spend your $200. There's no limit on positions or amount that you may spend on any player. It just works however the highest bid per player, that player will be awarded to that team. And I've got a link right down here that you can click on when I email these rules out to you, that you can read more about the draft. Now, I wanted to do $50 for the auction draft for the salaries, because how this is going to work is whatever you draft that player for that amount of money. For instance, down here, if you look, if Team A has a winning bid on Jamal Charles for $32, his actual amount of money that will be assigned to him is $8, because we're only putting in $50 of real money. So we're going to divide the $200 from the draft by 4, basically, with the real life money. And I'll explain how this will make more sense to you as we go along. So don't freak out if you don't understand what I'm talking about right now. But the thing is, you can only bid in dollar increments, and with 25 roster spots, that would really limit you to only bidding up to $2 on certain players, basically, at the most, because obviously $50 isn't going to go very far with 25 roster spots in $1 increments. So we had to bump it up to $200, and we will just divide everything down by 4. As you can see. So like, for instance, like I said, if you bid on Jamal Charles, have the winning bid for $32, it's really only going to be $8 for his real salary amount of your league dues that would go to him for that first year. And then none of the players on your team will be guaranteed. And this is a dynasty. It's kind of like a keeper league, but it's much more complex. So none of the players on your team will be guaranteed to be on your team in the second year of this, the way this is set up, this dynasty, or any years thereafter, unless you extend their contract through arbitration, or you re-sign that player through the restricted free agency or free agency. And I will explain that moving forward. So from this point on in the explanation and league rules, I'll be referring to each player's salary or contract amount in actual real cash that we will keep track of in a spreadsheet through Microsoft Excel, not the auction amount that we would need to divide by 4. So I hope that's clear. For the auction in ESPN, it'll be 200 fake dollars, I guess you would say, but your league dues is going to be $50. And then each player, however much you bid on them, will be assigned an amount of money, you know, based on that, whoever bids the most during the draft. Once again, say somebody bids $16 on Alex Smith in the draft, or in the auction draft. In real life, it would be actually $4 for his contract amount. For roster spots, there will be the following starting positions each week, 9 spots. You can read those. 1 flex position, which you can play running back, wide receiver, or tight end. And then there will be a total of 16 bench spots and 4 injured reserved spots. So this is equivalent to 25 total roster spots. Obviously, this equates to an average of $8 per roster spot during the fantasy auction draft, or $2 in the actual league amount, real money amount. And this is the maximum amount of IR spots available. That way, you will not hopefully have to release a player that ends up tearing an ACL or having a season-ending injury in order to make space on your roster to still remain competitive during the current year. This amount of roster spots, I'm hoping, will cut down on the number of waiver transactions, very similar to the NFL. And once again, there are no restrictions on your roster other than it must be completely filled at the end of the auction to create that financial level playing field at the beginning of the league. And after the auction, it is completely up to you how you want to fill or not fill your roster. Scoring, will use a pretty standard scoring system. There will not be any points per reception or rewards for big plays during the first year. The only thing is, in the real actual game of NFL, it seems like turnovers are what win and lose a lot of games. So doubling the negative points on the fumbles lost and the interceptions. So those will be worth -4, -2. And a lot of these things, these rules, like I said, this is a trial year. At the end of the year, as a board, as a league, we will vote on how we want to do this. Arbitration, and this is where it's going to get very, very new and very, very complex. So there will be an arbitration formula calculated after week 8 of each regular season and will be open for a 2-week period through week 10. The arbitration period that lasts 2 weeks immediately following each season, afterwards too, that'll be the second arbitration period before the free agency begins. The idea of arbitration is to give each team owner the opportunity to extend the contract of any players on his team before that player's contract expires at the end of the year and that player enters free agency. So the arbitration formula will be calculated based upon the top 30 performing players at their position and their respective salaries. I will bring this up in a minute. It can be summarized this way. The top 30 players at each position will have their total points added up, along with their total salaries added up to find the average salary per point at that position. Then we will take that average and multiply it by your players' total points through week 8, and then multiply it by 1.5 to find the amount you have to pay to extend the player's contract before they hit free agency at the end of the season. So you may extend the player's contract for as many years as you would like, once again based upon a yearly amount of money based on this formula. The reason why I'm multiplying it by 1.5 is because any player in the NFL knows that he is that valuable to his team that their team wants to extend their contract in the middle of the season before he hits free agency, and another team values him. Therefore, the player has the possibility to earn a higher salary elsewhere in free agency. Then the player is going to test free agency and get that highest possible salary. Essentially, though, when you extend a player's contract through arbitration, you are overpaying the player for their actual value, which is why we multiply it by 1.5 based on the average. So here is a hypothetical example for an owner wanting to extend Alex Smith's contract during the 2014 season. You would take the average point per salary for the top 30 quarterbacks through the first 8 weeks of the 2014 season. Let's say that works out to be 1 point equals 4.29. And I'm actually going to switch this over to the Excel because I think it's a little easier to read. So let's say I have the list of the top 30 quarterbacks over here based on their points. I have their respective salaries right next to them, and obviously these will be based on the auction results, not just hypothetical numbers. So down here I have the average number, the average amount salary and the average points for the top 30 quarterbacks through week 8. This breaks down to, looks like a little over 4 cents per point. So let's say Alex Smith has 120 points through week 8. In the highlighted box, you would just type in 120. Click outside that. It's going to take it, multiply it by that price per point, a little over 4 cents. Multiply it by 1.5, and that would be the arbitration contract amount that you would have to offer Alex Smith based on the top 30 point performing, statistically top performing quarterbacks and their salaries. So you could offer Alex Smith a 2-year extension at $773 a year. You could offer him a 1-year extension and sign him through 2015 for $773, or a 10-year extension at $773 each year. He would, if you did the 10 years, Alex Smith would be on your team for the next 10 years, and no one else would have any right to get him unless it was a trade, which we'll get to later. So that's how the arbitration works. That's how you can keep your players before they hit free agency. And like I said, it's based on just all averages of their salary and their points of the top 30 players at each position. And I'll do this for tight ends, wide receivers, and running backs, and it'll be the same formula. Their number of points that they have through week 8, their points, the average price per point based on the average salary and the average points for the top position. We'll multiply it times 1.5, and then that's the arbitration contract amount you'd have to offer them to extend their contract. We'll do the same thing at the end of the season. I'll update the points. Obviously, the salaries will stay the same because they will be the same throughout the entire season. And we will do the same thing. The price per point might change, but this formula will not. And then you can have a chance once in the middle of the season through week 8 through week 10, and then once at the end of the season to extend their contract. And so there's the example that I showed you for Alex Smith on arbitration. Whoops, and I forgot. I need to update that. That should be Alex Smith and not Jamal Charles. And like I said, we'll do the same thing for, and also for defensive and special teams. Here's a few rules. The first arbitration period will be from week 8 to week 10. Second arbitration period will be immediately following the Ultimate Fantasy Super Bowl. You can base, and I pretty much explained that. The only thing is, if a player gets injured, let's say Adrian Peterson gets injured the second week of the season, he doesn't play, but you try to use that formula, but he's only scored 14 points in week 1. Well, obviously that's going to skew his contract. You're not going to be able to re-sign Adrian Peterson. So what we'll do, if it's very borderline, we'll vote on it as a board and see if that player is eligible to enter arbitration. If not, then you can roll his contract over for one more year. I think it's only fair that you don't lose out on a year before he hits free agency. You can roll over the exact same amount that he has during that current year over to the next season if he's not arbitration eligible and his contract is up at the end of the year. Moving on to restricted free agency, it's going to be very, very similar to arbitration.